Okay, so today we're going to be diving into some pretty wild concepts, ideas about who we are, where we came from, stuff that really stretches the imagination. And our guide for this deep dive is L Ron Hubbard and his book Scientology: A History of Man.
It's a fascinating read, that's for sure. Hubbard doesn't hold back.
Yeah.
Right from the first page, he's making some pretty bold claims.
Oh, absolutely. He opens with this line: "This is a cold-blooded and factual account of your last 60 trillion years." I mean, talk about a hook. 60 trillion years. That's almost impossible to wrap your head around.
Right. It's like, okay, I'm in. Tell me more. And what he's basically saying is that our existence, our true story, goes way, way beyond this single lifetime. We're talking about a lineage that stretches back to the very beginnings of life itself.
It's mind-boggling, right? But Hubbard insisted this wasn't just speculation or some kind of philosophical musing. He claimed this knowledge came from direct experience through this process of auditing, which is central to Scientology.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that for Scientologists, auditing isn't just some, therapeutic technique. It's seen as a spiritual practice, a way to access deeper levels of awareness and connect with this vast timeline that Everett's talking about.
So it's like through auditing, you can actually tap into memories and experiences that go beyond your current lifetime.
That's the idea. It's about uncovering your whole track, as they call it, this continuous thread of existence that stretches across lifetimes.
So how does Hubbard differentiate between like auditing your current life versus auditing this whole track?
He talks about it being like different layers of an onion, or maybe a better analogy is like different chapters in a very, very long book. Your current life is just the latest chapter. It's shaped by all the chapters that came before it, all those past experiences, but it's only a small part of the whole story.
So are you saying there's value in revisiting those earlier chapters?
Absolutely. Hubbard argued that by accessing and understanding those past experiences, we can free ourselves from limiting beliefs and patterns that might be holding us back in this lifetime.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this connects to the whole 60 trillion year thing, but how does he actually break down this concept of the whole track?
Well, he identifies four main areas of past incidents. You have, of course, your present life. Then there's your genetic line, which is basically your evolutionary inheritance. Then you've got specialized segments of the whole track, kind of like significant past lives. And finally, there's the theta body line, which encompasses like the entire existence of the theta being.
Whoa, a lot to unpack there. So the genetic line, that's where he introduces the idea of the genetic entity, or GE, right?
Exactly.
Now, that's where things start to get really interesting for me. I mean, we're talking about the actual memories and experiences encoded in our DNA, passed down through billions of years of evolution, right?
Right. It's like this ancestral memory bank that we all carry within us.
Okay, so walk me through this. What kind of journey are we talking about here? What did our GE supposedly go through?
Well, Hubbard starts at the very beginning, with single-celled organisms battling for survival in those primordial oceans. He paints this picture of these tiny creatures facing incredible challenges, struggling to survive and evolve.
And he claims to have, like, specific memories from these early stages.
He describes specific incidents, yes, like there's one he calls the helper, which he says is rooted in the very act of cell division.
Cell division, like, how does that even work as a memory?
Well, he describes this process where one cell, after dividing, essentially sacrifices itself to help the other cells survive.
So it's like this primal act of self-sacrifice, hardwired into us from, what, the dawn of time?
Exactly. And Hubbard suggests that this incident, this early experience of the GE, could be connected to our own deeply rooted instincts for survival, our willingness to help others even at our own expense.
Wow. And then, of course, we have to talk about the clam. I mean, who knew that a clam could hold such significance in our evolutionary history?
Right. It seems kind of random at first, but Hubbard paints a surprisingly vivid, even disturbing picture of what he believes the GE experienced during this stage.
Disturbing how, I mean, it's a clam, right?
Well, imagine being trapped inside that shell, unable to escape, baked by the sun, vulnerable to predators. It's a feeling of being completely helpless, at the mercy of forces beyond your control.
Okay, now I'm starting to see where he's going with this. Okay, so we've got this image of our GE, battling its way through a primordial soup, eventually becoming, well, a clam.
It's quite a journey, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy to get caught up in the biology of it all. But Hubbard's point is that this is just one side of the story, the physical evolution.
Right, because we're not just talking about like amoebas and clams here. We're talking about us.
Exactly, and that's where the concept of the theta being comes in.
Okay, so theta being, this is where we move from like Darwin to more of a spiritual realm.
In a way, yes. Think of it this way. If the GE is the hardware, the physical body shaped by evolution, the theta being is the software, the consciousness that inhabits and animates that body.
So the theta being is the real me, the part that thinks and feels and experiences the world.
Precisely. Hubbard described the theta being as an immortal entity, a being of pure energy and consciousness that exists independently of the physical universe.
Okay, so then why does it feel like we're, stuck in these limited bodies? If we're these powerful eternal beings, why aren't we like flying around and doing telekinesis and stuff?
That's a great question. And Hubbard believed that a lot of it has to do with what he called facsimiles.
Facsimiles, right? Those are like mental recordings of past experiences.
Yeah, think of them like mental snapshots or video clips that we carry with us from this life and all our past lives.
Okay, so not just genetic memory from the GE, but our own personal memory bank stretching back through, well, however many lifetimes.
Exactly. And just like those old photos can trigger certain emotions or memories, Hubbard argued that these facsimiles can have a powerful, often subconscious influence on our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So, like, we could be carrying around baggage, not just from this life, but from like 1,000 lifetimes ago.
That's the idea. And it's not always bad baggage, of course. There can be positive facsimiles, too, memories of joy, love, success. But Hubbard believed that a lot of our limitations, our fears, our insecurities, stem from these negative facsimiles that we haven't fully processed or resolved.
So instead of operating from this place of like pure potential, we're weighed down by all this past stuff.
Exactly. It's like trying to run a marathon with a backpack full of rocks. You might
Yeah.
eventually get there, but it's going to be a lot harder than it needs to be.
So it's like we're carrying around these mental souvenirs from all our past adventures. Some good, some, well, maybe not so good.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with souvenirs, sometimes it's nice to take them out, reminisce about the good times, but other times we might want to just keep those memories tucked away in the attic.
Right. Especially if they're, bringing back not so pleasant memories.
Exactly. And that's where Hubbard introduces this idea of theta traps.
Okay, theta traps. This is where things always start to feel a little sci-fi for me.
I can see that.
So what are we talking about here? Like, are these actual physical traps?
Not exactly. Think of it more like situations or scenarios that our theta beings can become, well, trapped in.
Trapped how?
Well, Hubbard believed that theta beings, in their pure state, are incredibly powerful creative entities. But when they start to identify too strongly with the physical universe, with matter, energy, space, and time,
Which he calls ME. Right.
right, MES, when they become too focused on the messed universe, they become vulnerable to manipulation.
Okay, I'm following so far. Manipulation by who, though?
Well, Hubbard believed that there are beings who are more aligned with the messed universe, beings who have, let's say, a vested interest in keeping the theta beings from realizing their full potential.
Okay, now we're definitely in sci-fi territory.
Maybe, but stay with me. Hubbard describes these beings as having created elaborate devices and scenarios designed to capture and control theta beings.
By setting traps, like cosmic booby traps.
In a way, yes. And some of the traps he describes are pretty wild. There's one called the Jack in the Box, which he says bombards the theta being with confusing images and sensations, basically overloading their senses.
So kind of like a sensory deprivation chamber, but in reverse.
Exactly. And then there's the Halver, which Hubbard claimed can actually split a person's sense of self, creating internal conflict and self-sabotage.
So instead of being this whole unified being, we become like fragmented, at war with ourselves.
Exactly.
Wow. It's a lot to take in, that's for sure. But I have to ask, like, if these theta traps are so powerful, so insidious, how do we even stand a chance? How do we break free?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And for Hubbard, the answer was Scientology. He believed that through auditing, through the practices and principles of Scientology, we could become aware of these traps, understand how they operate, and ultimately free ourselves from their influence.
So it's like once you see the trap, it loses its power.
In a way, yes. Awareness is a big part of it. But it's also about taking action, about applying the tools and techniques that Hubbard developed to confront and overcome these limitations.
Okay, so it's like a combination of like therapy and spiritual practice and, well, maybe a little bit of cosmic awareness thrown in for good measure.
You got it. It's a unique approach, that's for sure.
It definitely is. And whether you buy into the whole, 60 trillion year history or the cosmic booby traps, there's something undeniably fascinating about Hubbard's ideas, this notion that we're capable of so much more than we realize.
Absolutely, and I think that's what makes this book, Scientology, A History of Man, so compelling, so thought-provoking. It challenges us to expand our definition of what's possible, to look beyond the limitations of our current understanding, and explore the full potential of who we might be.
Well said. It's been quite a journey diving into these concepts, exploring this unique perspective on human existence, and who knows, maybe there's a little bit of truth to it all, a little something that resonates with uh, our own theta beings.
Maybe so.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into L Ron Hubbard's Scientology, A History of Man. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these wild and wonderful ideas, so be sure to join the conversation online using our episode hashtag. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, keep diving deep.